I'm Lezlie Jane. These are my bronze sculptures that I just completed and installed the last week. These are comprised of 8 images that are part of the West Seattle history and 2 images that are part of the geological parts of West Seattle, very unique to our West Seattle Peninsula. This one here represents Alki Point, and as you can see, the Alki Lighthouse. There's a lantern at the bottom that indicates that this point was lit for the safety of sailors and boats for 45 years before a lighthouse was actually erected on it. And it's definitely an icon for the West Seattle community. So I was commissioned to do this piece by Junction 47. That's Equity Residential, a big company. But it was the community here that brought me on board and had the vision of putting historical panels in here, and that's Juno, Junction Neighborhood Organization, and the West Seattle Junction Association. Wonderful people, and they made this happen. There's 10 of these. They're inserted into the columns that wrap around from California Avenue Southwest and wrap around Alaska Street, 7 on Alaska Street, 3 on California Avenue. I hope you'll come and see them someday. You can go to my website, lesliejane.com, and each one of these will be represented, and they all have a lot more history and interesting facts about each of the things that they represent. These are made in bronze, by the way. I carved each one out of clay. Well, first, of course, I created all my imageries, and I took it to the community group for their input and their approval. And then I built these boxes, and I put clay, it's an oil clay, and I carved each one of them by hand until they were just right. Then I took them out and I molded them. Then they were, waxes were pulled from the mold, and then the waxes are then invested and cast in bronze. The bronze is then, of course, finished and patinaed, and then we installed. Yeah, it's a long process. I was approached to do this project, and I have done a number of pieces in West Seattle, so I suspect the reason the community groups approached me was they felt confident that I would get them something that they wanted. And I felt very drawn to doing this project. I am a West Seattleite. I was born here in West Seattle. In fact, I was born in the old West Seattle Hospital that existed on this corner, much to my surprise. I love it here. I'll always live here, and it was a joy for me to locate all the things that I thought were very special about here and at least represent at least 10 of them. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have represented the beautiful West Seattle that I love on these panels.
Describe how you picked the 10. How did they come about?
That was a long process. It came about with many hours of research. Imagery, I went through all the different, of course the Southwest Historical Society has a beautiful website for research, and actually the Seattle Times does. There's other museums that do, and it was many hours. I actually went through a whole series of doing them one way and then switched. Started all over again and did them with more, a few more with people in them and a few more with imagery of little ducks and some foxes. I wanted to appeal to children also. So there's something for, if you're this tall, there's some imagery that'll be interesting to a small person, and then there's of course the historical, which appeals to a lot of people, and then the geographical, which is an interesting, and we as a peninsula here and part of a major metropolis, we're very unique in that respect.
Describe how this may be a progression from some of the other historical West Seattle art pieces you've done for the public.
Oh, they do seem to do that, don't they? I completed, last year I completed the Luna Girls, and they're 3 9-foot-tall women that are located on public park property next to Salty's down on Harbor Avenue. And they represent women from the 1920s dressed in bathing suits, and they're celebrating the 100 years that we've been a community here in West Seattle. Then a piece I finished either right before that or right after that is in front of the Spruce Building down on Alaska and Fauntleroy, and that one represents that very intersection and what the Fauntleroy word means and why it's part of our community here, and the Alaska word, where that came from and why that's a part of our community here now. It also talks about the first peoples here, of course, the Duwamish. And then, of course, I did a number of them. You should go to my website to see them.
Well, we've got Weather Watch.
Yes, there was Weather Watch. There's
that was the first, right?
Yeah, Weather Watch was the very first, and that was the first project I did over 20-some years ago. Then I did Cormorant Cove Park, and it wasn't just the art I did for those, and Constellation Park and Marine Reserve. Those were passions of mine regarding the waterfront that I wanted to secure for the public use forever. And Weather Watch Park was actually a city piece of property that they were using to park their equipment on, and I felt that someday its value would be too lurid for the city and they would sell it. So by creating a park there, we able to keep it for our community. And the other parks were more enhancements. They all have educational components involved in them that are about the site and about the history of West Seattle. Well, I grew up in West Seattle from birth on, and so the West Seattle Junction was our shopping district. This is where I came to buy my school clothes at the Pennies, and La Grace, the famous dress shop. They had everything there. Husky's Deli has always been used by my family. In fact, my mother worked there when she was in high school. This is very a hometown for us. It's our small town, and we cherish it.
Okay, so let's go on a little tour of these pieces.
All right,
We've
sure.
got 9 more to go.
Yeah, we do. Well, this piece represents the point at Lincoln Park. It's Williams Point, and this represents the area where Coleman Pool is. A long time ago, it used to be just a mud hole that was fed by the sound as the Puget Sound came in and out with the tide. They dug it out and made it a little bit more of a swimming pool. Eventually, the Coleman family dedicated an actual Olympic-sized swimming pool for the community use in 1941. This is a picture actually of derived from a photograph of my grandmother. She and my grandfather were here visiting. They lived in Butte, Montana at the time, visiting in 1922, and she couldn't swim, of course, but Grandpa was a photographer, and so she would pose for him. So that was my inspiration for this one. Of course, we have the mountains behind here, the Olympics, and that's what you see when you stand there.
And each one has a little piece for the kids, like you said.
Yeah, that one had the ducks. This one represents the Duwamish Indian tribes, who are our most local Salish tribe. And this is what would be called a house pole. They didn't do totem poles here, the Salish didn't, but they did house poles. They were welcome poles. And this represents their canoes, and these are their weaving hats. And as we've found that Duwamish have been here for longer than we could date.
And now we're going around the corner?
Around the corner to Alaska Street. This one, represents the Log House Museum and the Alki Homestead restaurant. And this is the log house as it was when it was first built in 1904. And I put a little fox here, and I think the kids will kind of like that little fox.
Okay, then we'll go to the next.
Yep, over here. Well, this is one of the geographic ones, and this one represents our geographic legacy. West Seattle is extremely unique. We have 4.8 miles of public saltwater front in West Seattle. We also have got creek front, and we also have got river front. And it's there's just other cities just can't claim that part, and nowhere else in Seattle has anything like that either. So I wanted to be sure. We also have views of all the mountains. It's an extraordinary location. This represents our Seattle Fire Department Station 32, which was, Station 32 is here in West Seattle, and they were first opened up in 1914. And they had a really beautiful station just a block away. It's gone now. And this represents what they wore. This is an oiled coat. This is a leather hat. And of course they had big gloves to keep them from being harmed in the fires. And this one was fun. I loved finding this out, and I just didn't know this. This was the very first ferry boat to be on Puget Sound and Elliott Bay. Was the ferry that was brought here to go from Seattle to our Duwamish Peninsula. It was developers trying to influenced people to come on over here, way over here, and make homes. So that was in 1888. After that, many ferries followed, but this one served on Puget Sound and Elliott Bay for I think 35 years. And it was called the City of Seattle. And it was a paddle wheel type boat. It was a dual paddle wheel. This represents our another part of our geographic legacy. We've got Fauntleroy Creek, which now has a fish ladder in it, and they're trying to lure the different salmons up it. We also have Longfellow Creek, which is over 4 miles long, and it's totally exposed, and it's a huge watershed off of the Puget Sound Peninsula, or excuse me, the Duwamish Peninsula. And over here, this will be our 9th one. This represents city views then and now. There aren't too many cities that look back at themselves, but in West Seattle we have several views where we can actually view our entire beautiful skyline. And we look over, of course, Elliott Bay, and this is the Kalakala, the famous Kalakala, which never was quite resurrected. And of course this represents a dress of the 1800s when people first started coming to West Seattle and looking back. So we're representing times from the 1800s all the way up to today. This piece represents our Alaska Junction. 1907 is when we first came here, and we put these are the rail lines coming on, and the Blue Park trolley came here. This woman's dressed in 1930s clothing, and she has got with her a little Boston Terrier, which is the most popular dog in 1930 in the entire United States. It's also one of the very few dogs that was actually bred only here in the United States, is unique to that. So that's all 10 of them.
So this is quite a sweep.
Quite a sweep. I tried to be inclusive. There was so much more I could have done. There were so many more ideas that would be fun to still represent. I mean, each district, each area of West Seattle has got stories to tell. And maybe I'll get a chance to do that sometime.